What is going on, guys? The 2020 NFL regular season is now in the books. Like any other year, we saw several ultra-talented teams and big-name stars fail to live up to their high preseason expectations. Well, we're here to remind you of all those letdowns from the past year, as we bring you the biggest disappointments from the 2020 NFL season. Before we count down the top 10, here's a look at a couple of dishonorable mentions. New England Patriots. Many folks correctly predicted the Pats to finish with a losing record and miss out on the postseason. They lost franchise legend Tom Brady in free agency after all, and Bill Belichick didn't have the cap space to upgrade an aging roster. And losing a league-high 8 players to COVID-19 opt-outs complicated matters. That said, we expected the greatest head coach of all time to make it work with 2015 MVP Cam Newton. And we figured he'd do just fine with a supremely talented defense, even though they lost Patrick Chung and Dante Hightower to opt-outs. But nope, Newton wasn't much of a fit in Josh McDaniels' offense. The defense struggled against the many elite quarterbacks they faced. The Patriots dropped several close games that they're used to winning. It all added up to a 7-9 finish. The Pats' first losing season since 2000, and their first non-playoff campaign since 2008. Las Vegas Raiders 2020 first-round picks. The Raiders had the 2 first-round picks in a loaded 2020 draft class. They made Alabama speedster Henry Ruggs III the first receiver taken, having used the number 12 pick on him. Well, Ruggs was largely a non-factor in 13 games. He finished with just 26 receptions for a mere 452 yards and 2 touchdowns. 10 rookie wideouts had more receiving yards than Ruggs, and 18 rookies had more receptions. The Raiders passed on Justin Jefferson, who set the rookie receiving record with 1,400 yards, as well as other talents such as C.D. Lamb, Chase Claypool, and T. Higgins. Las Vegas also reached for Ohio State rookie Damon Arnett with the number 18 pick. Pro Football Focus graded him at a woeful 41.7 for the year, and according to Pro Football Reference, Arnett allowed 24 completions on 30 targets. Now to the real list. Number 10, San Francisco 49ers. We could have the 49ers lower on this list, considering they regressed by 7 wins. But honestly, nobody can fault them for failing to overcome so many injuries to key players. Top pass rusher Nick Bosa coming off a superb rookie year, tore his ACL in week 2. Aw. Superstar tight end George Kittle missed 8 games. Cornerback Richard Sherman, coming off an all-pro season, missed all but 5 games. Starting quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo was limited to 6 games. Top running backs Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman were limited to 8 games apiece. It was just way too much for San Fran to overcome. Yes, they swept the Los Angeles Rams and had impressive road wins against the Patriots and Cardinals. But at the end of the day, 6-10 and a last place finish in your division is quite the drop-off from 13 wins and a Super Bowl appearance. Sherman is likely a goner, and reports suggest the 49ers could replace Garoppolo. With better health, San Fran should be a playoff contender in 2021 and beyond. But this was simply a lost year for Kyle Shanahan's star-studded team. Number 9, Michael Thomas. Thomas will get the chance to redeem himself in the postseason, but it's hard to not be disappointed with how his 2020 regular season panned out. And no, we aren't just saying this from a fantasy football perspective. Thomas was named the 2019 Offensive Player of the Year after recording 149 receptions, a single-season record, while also leading the NFL with 1,725 receiving yards. However, Thomas was limited to only 7 games in the regular season due to a lingering ankle injury and a 1-game suspension for punching teammate C.J. Gardner-Johnson in practice. Even in the 7 games he played, Thomas wasn't all that productive. He had just 40 receptions for 438 yards and 0 touchdowns. Simply not what you'd expect from the man whom many believe is the NFL's best receiver. New Orleans can only hope that it was a one-off year and that Thomas will return to his superstar form in the postseason and beyond. Number 8, Atlanta Falcons offense. We didn't pick the Falcons to make the playoffs this season. We knew their leaky defense and annoying habits of blowing should-be victories would cost them dearly. But we expected far better from their usually explosive and potent offense. The offseason additions of Todd Gurley, Hayden Hurst, and Laquan Treadwell gave Atlanta 11 former first-round picks on offense. Well, to put it mildly, all of that talent failed to produce. Julio Jones missed 7 games, so we'll give him a pass. Hayden Hurst performed decently, and Calvin Ridley broke out with 90 receptions for 1,374 yards and 9 touchdowns. The rest, not so good. Ryan had another fine statistical season, but he couldn't shrug off his inability to finish one-score games. Gurley had just 678 rushing yards on 195 carries, averaging a mere 3.5 yards per carry, though he managed 9 touchdowns. The Falcons' offensive line, which is loaded with former first-rounders, allowed 41 sacks, Atlanta finished just 16th in scoring offense, 18th in total yards, and 27th in rushing offense. So much for hoarding first-round talent and forming an explosive offense. Number 7, Minnesota Vikings. Many folks pegged the Vikings to win the 2020 NFC North Division, believing that Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers were due for regression. So much for both. The Vikings offense was better than ever under Mike Zimmer. Dalvin Cook rushed for 1,557 yards and 16 touchdowns. The aforementioned Justin Jefferson had 1,400 receiving yards, the most ever for a rookie. Minnesota finished 4th in yardage on offense. But Kirk Cousins once again struggled against elite competition, and the youth movement on defense failed in most aspects. Minnie's usually stout unit was downright awful, allowing the 4th most points and the 6th most yards. Yeah, not having Danielle Hunter at all this year hurt a lot, as did injuries to Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. But Zimmer, a defensive guru, usually finds a way to make it work. After starting out 1-5, Minnie won 5 of its next 6 and found themselves back in the playoff race at 6-6. But they proceeded to lose 3 straight and finished with a disappointing 7-9 record, their first losing season since 2014. And now serious questions remain as to whether or not this management, coaching staff, and core group of players are good enough to take Minnie to the promised land. Number 6, the injury bug. Injuries are always going to be a part of football. You have 300-pound guys tackling each other. It's going to happen. But this year especially just felt brutal in so many ways. So many of our favorite superstars and game-changing players were lost in the early season, and it largely affected some playoff races. As noted earlier, the 49ers played without several key starters this year. Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, arguably the NFL's 2 best running backs, combined for just 5 games. The aforementioned Michael Thomas and Julio Jones combined for 16 games. The Denver Broncos lost stud pass rusher Von Miller before the season started after he suffered a dislocated tendon. They also lost top wideout Cortland Sutton for the season in Week 2 when he tore his ACL. Dak Prescott, who was on pace for over 6,000 passing yards, suffered a gruesome season-ending ankle injury in Week 5. Cincinnati Bengals rookie Joe Burrow suffered season-ending ACL and MCL tears in Week 11. Those are just some of the many big-name stars and fan favorites who missed a lot of action in 2020. Here's hoping to better health for all the players in 2021, and for safe recoveries for the injured guys. Number 5, Arizona Cardinals. Once upon a time, Cliff Kingsbury's Cardinals were in a 3-way race for the NFC West. They stood at 5-2, and later 6-3. A wild card berth at minimum seemed like a guarantee. The defense survived without top pass rusher Chandler Jones, who missed 11 games. Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins formed a nearly unstoppable duo on offense. It was all coming together. It all seemed fine. Until it didn't. Kingsbury's questionable play calls in late game situations, along with their kicking game issues, piled up quickly. Arizona lost 5 of its final 7 games, including its last 2 contests, to finish a disappointing 8-8. The Chicago Bears claimed the NFC's final wildcard spot, thanks to the tiebreaker, and the once promising Cardinals had to take their couches for the postseason. Number 4, 2019 quarterback class. What a brutal year for sophomore quarterbacks. Speaking of Murray, he dazzled in his 2019 rookie year with 3,722 passing yards and 20 touchdowns, to go along with 544 rushing yards and route to Offensive Rookie of the Year honors. But after a scorching first half in 2020, Murray cooled down in Arizona's aforementioned second half meltdown. He had just one 300-yard game in the final 8 contests, and it was held to 1 or 0 touchdown passes in 5 of those games. Daniel Jones, the number 6 pick, lost 9 of 14 starts, tossing 11 touchdowns against 10 interceptions. He took a whopping 45 sacks in those 14 games. Dwayne Haskins, the number 15 selection from 2019, lost 5 of 6 starts and was released before Week 17 after he was caught without a mask in a public setting. Drew Lock won 4 of 5 starts in his rookie year in 2019. John Elway added to his offensive arsenal by signing Pro Bowl running back Melvin Gordon and by drafting wideouts Jared Jeudy and KJ Hamler. Quarterbacks guru Pat Shurmur was also hired as offensive coordinator, and that amounted to, wait for it, 16 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 4 wins, and 9 losses. So much for Locke taking that next step. Gardner Minshew shined as a rookie with 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 2019, winning 6 of 12 starts on a lowly Jacksonville Jaguars team. But in 2020, he went 1-7 with 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and eventually lost his starting job. Some might call it a sophomore slump, but based on what we saw in 2020, it wouldn't surprise us if Kyler Murray is the only quarterback from the 2019 draft class who's still holding down a starting job in a couple of years. Number 3, Dallas Cowboys. Yes, they lost Dak Prescott in Week 5 of the season, but that's why they signed Andy Dalton, who was still an upgrade over the rest of the starting quarterbacks in the NFC East. And yet the star-studded Cowboys couldn't win a division that only required 7 wins. Mike McCarthy replaced renowned underachiever Jason Garrett, and the Cowboys still managed to take a step back. Ezekiel Elliott had far and away his worst season as a pro, averaging a career-low 65.3 yards per game, and he fumbled a career-high 6 times. Yes, this once stout O-line had some injuries, but 44 sacks allowed? It's a big yikes. On that defense that consists of DeMarcus Lawrence, Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, Aldon Smith, and Trayvon Diggs, finished 31st in rushing and 28th in scoring defense. The cap-strapped Cowboys now have to pay Dak Prescott even more after unraveling entirely without him in the final 11 games. Other than that, 2020 wasn't that horrible for the Cowboys. Kinda. Number 2, Carson Wentz. That's another big yikes. Wentz's 4-year, $128 million extension doesn't kick in until 2021, and this comes after he endured his worst season yet, one that saw him get benched in favor of rookie Jalen Hurts for the final 4 games. Wentz set career lows across the board, a 57.4 completion percentage, 2,620 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and a 72.8 QB rating, to go along with a career-high 15 interceptions. Yes, the Eagles' usually great offensive line was downright awful. Injuries to Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey, coupled with a down year from Pro Bowl tight end, did not help matters. But Wentz also won 9 games and an NFC East division title with a lackluster supporting cast in 2019. This year he imploded so bad, even in a laughably weak NFC East. And so reports suggest Wentz wants out of Philly. But the Eagles would rather keep him and try to fix the $128 million man. Good luck finding a taker for that deal unless, well, Wentz agrees to restructure it. 3 years after celebrating a Super Bowl championship, and 1 year after enjoying a 3rd straight playoff appearance, the Eagles face a very uncertain future. From management to the coaching staff to the aging roster to their struggling quarterback. Number 1, Houston Texans. After consecutive AFC South Division titles, the Texans unraveled early and often in 2020. Yes, Bill O'Brien's decision to trade DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson was as disastrous as we all expected. But we also felt there was more than enough talent here for Houston to at least snag 1 of 3 wildcard spots in the AFC. Deshaun Watson set career highs in passing yards with 4,823 and in touchdowns with 33. And yet the Texans finished 3rd worst in the NFL with a 4-12 record. They fired O'Brien after losing their first 4 games. Yeah, what a genius call to make him the de facto GM, so he can run Hopkins and Jadeveon Clowney out of town, while taking on bad contracts and wasting his valuable draft capital. Will Fuller should have been traded at the deadline. The Texans held on to their top receiver, and he, along with corner Bradley Roby, were hit with suspensions for violating the NFL's PED policy. J.J. Watt publicly called out his team after a Week 16 loss to the lowly Cincinnati Bengals.
If you can't care enough to go out there and give everything you've got and try your hardest, that's bullshit.
Speaking of which, the Texans had the league's worst rushing defense, allowing 160.3 yards on the ground per game. And finally, the Texans have to hand over the number 3 selection in next year's draft to the Dolphins, thanks to the Laramie Tunsil trade from a year ago. Other than that, 2020 wasn't all that bad for this franchise, which is very sarcastic. What do you think was the biggest disappointment of the 2020 NFL season? Join me in the comment section below. Make sure to follow myself and TPS on social media. We post great content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, everything. We're just there. Go find us. Go subscribe. Go do the whole thing. Sorry, my voice cracked. It's a little bit early for me here now at TPS headquarters. Make sure to like this video because it really helps us out, and subscribe to TPS. We post videos every single day. Every day's a new video. Of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jason Biondo. I'll see y'all next time. That's so cringy.
My knee.